Mr. D. What's up, brother? It's good to see you bright and early on the other side of the world.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Gotta love the internet.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass when you have to try to schedule anything with people that live on an exact opposite time zone. Like it's a I don't know how people did it. You know how they did it, but like think about how we just take for granted now that you and I can just like hop on a video chat and talk. Think about like 100 years ago, 200 years ago. It's like I wanted to get a message to you. It'd be weeks or months or maybe even longer, and it just gets lost. Like the ship just crashed and just you never got my message.
Totally. Or you get some kind of like super steroid up pigeon, just
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 cruising,
going for it,
just cruising
just cruising
across the
for like
Pacific.
thousands of miles.
Yeah, man,
Yeah,
we are
man.
very very lucky with all the technology we have and stuff. So there's there's so much stuff that we can chat about today. Um, I know like a lot of like you've just been putting out a ton of content, almost a a uncomfortable amount of content that makes me think like I'm not working hard enough. The amount of content you're putting out on iOS 14, it's like the equivalent of I think like Apple and Facebook watching and just saying like how does like this guy is writing more than we're doing internally. We don't even know what we're doing on half this shit. And this guy is just over here just writing documentation and doing videos and trainings on it. So before I even like not even a question there, but the whole point of this was, and then we can talk about just your work ethic there and why you're doing all that. But like, are you happy is the wrong word. I don't want to piss people off. Are you more optimistic or pessimistic about what our industry looks like after this? I have some very strong viewpoints on it, so I'm going to share after you. But I want to get your thought on it.
Ooh, I like it. And that's what I love about talking. Every time I get to talk with you, it's the fact that you've got strong viewpoints and you're firm about them, and that's a really great place to start conversations. And as opposed to like some people I'm talking to and they get really wishy-washy,
Yeah,
um, and they don't know where they stand on it. I mean, I'm very much the same. I've got certain opinions. Not to say that those opinions are unshakable, but essentially, like the entire reason why I started sharing so much, it in a lot of ways it's very selfish. It's just my way of internalizing the information that I receive, and as and it's my sense check, right? If I take that information and synthesize multiple informational points, and put them out somewhere, and if no one says you're absolutely full of shit and this is completely wrong, then my stuff's validated to a certain point. And what I'm looking for are contrarian views, or are people saying no, this is a completely wrong way of thinking, and then I can recalibrate accordingly. So it's very self-driven. Don't get me wrong. There's hardly any altruism involved in what I'm doing here. It's just a really nice side effect of that. But that being said, so because of all that stuff that got released in December last year, with I guess the first thing that got brought to my attention was, before that I was watching WWDC, um, and hearing about this whole like ATT thing happening. I'm like, okay, shit, this is kind of weird. What is this thing? September it was meant to happen. It didn't happen in September, and then Facebook came out in December and put out all that guidance. And I kind of saw writing on the wall, because I was like, wait a second. First, Facebook's putting out all these webinars. They're taking out full page ads in the Wall Street Journal and a few other very major publications. And then after that, managing to talk to machine learning experts and attribution experts, and like people that work at the IAB and sitting in on W3C calls. There's so much writing on the wall in terms of web privacy and web tracking, and everyone is thinking Facebook, Apple, ATT. But realistically speaking, ATT is only the catalytic point for a whole bunch of other stuff that's coming down the pipe that, like, I think most people aren't even aware of, because it's so conceptual at this point, but the intention is there for people that run the internet, the Googles, the Facebooks, the even the Apples on the hardware side and on Safari. People that run the internet, the intentions are to self-regulate and figure out ways to anonymize users from the nefarious type of tracking that at least the capability, right? Not to say that the whole thing is nefarious, but the capability is there for nefarious actors to act in very bad ways if they wanted to. So cookies are going to get deprecated next year. Trade Desk is working on Unified ID 2.0. So much stuff is happening. And so essentially, to go back to what you were saying around like, I don't know if same thing as you. I don't know if happy is the right word, but this has been a long time coming. And I'm glad that the industry is trying to regulate itself rather than get it to a point where we have like a global GDPR or a global CCPA. I forget what the more concrete version of CCP. I forget what the acronyms are, but it's getting a lot more restricted there as well. And it's going to get possibly to a point where it's not data sharing anymore, but it could possibly get to a place of sale of data where, platforms and publishers have to then purchase data per user in that type of nature. And hopefully it doesn't get to that point, but it's going to get wacky for a while, man. And if all the people that, and I've been enough in enough clubhouse rooms and conversations now where a lot of the marketers that you think would know what the hell's going on, and they're running multi-million-dollar businesses either as agencies or info product or just marketing centric type entrepreneurs and type businesses. A lot of them were DMing me after these rooms and they're like, dude, all the stuff that you guys were talking about just flew right over my head. Facebook's going to figure it out, right? And I'm like, yeah, but it's not a Facebook only problem. It's just that everyone's talking about Facebook. This is something that's going to, Google's working on Flock. Facebook and Google are working at a very high level, putting forward a whole bunch of proposals at the W3C. There's a ton of stuff coming down the pipe. And I think it's going to do to direct response marketers and agencies or, the Facebook advertiser types. It's going to do to them what COVID did to brick and mortar stores that were not prepared. Right. Some of them didn't survive. A whole bunch of shop fronts went up on lease just because of the fact that they couldn't pivot fast enough, or they couldn't wrap their head around what the repercussions were, or they were just waiting for handouts. And I'm hearing a lot of people say that right now, which is like, oh, Facebook's just they have to figure it out. It's billions of dollars. I'm like, yeah, but what if it takes 9 months to figure it out? Do you have 9 months worth of runway?
But they also don't, right? And so like, I want to come back to just let's put a pin in me coming back to like why I think it's a good thing. But like just to go on this thread, this assumption that because Facebook is one of the biggest companies in the world, that they have to figure it out, right? Is flawed and historically not necessarily, there's not a lot of precedent for it to support the claim that just because you're the biggest company means that you figure out changes, right? If anything, it's actually the exact opposite. If anything, when you're the 800-pound gorilla in the room, you're usually a little slower to see big changes, right? Fast changes that hit real hard. You look at Blockbuster, right? Blockbuster, I'm not necessarily comparing Blockbuster to Facebook, right? So just anybody that's like watching this and saying like they're not the same thing. But what I'm saying is like, Blockbuster saw Netflix coming. They knew this was happening. They knew technically, like it wasn't like this totally caught them off guard, right? And if anything, Blockbuster, if you, I'm drawing a blank on the founder of not Reed, the kind of more unknown founder of Netflix, right? Co-founder. I'm drawing a blank on his name right now.
Yeah,
but
I'm drawing a blank here too.
He has a great book, and in it he talks about his They were at a retreat early on in the days of Netflix, and Blockbuster wanted to meet with them and said, we're going to meet with you tomorrow morning. And there's this whole, it's a funny story. They were on this retreat. They had no suit. They had nothing nice with them because it was like this really radical retreat they went on. They rented a private jet, flew into Texas to meet the headquarters, and basically like laughed out of the room. Right, like Blockbuster just laughed them out of the room. They could have bought them for, tens of millions of dollars. I forget the exact amount, but it was like pennies.
50 million.
Yeah, it was
50 million.
pennies, fractions of a penny on the dollar, right? And that's happened throughout history with lots of tech companies. In the early days, you look at all the camera companies. You look at Canon. You look at HP. You look at a lot of these companies that were at one time if you said at the time like Canon is going to be out of business or they're going to be obsolete one day, it's like that's ridiculous, right? Nobody's going. They're the big company. They're going to see everything. They're the smartest people,
sure.
Right? And so I think that's it's kind of flawed thinking to say Facebook just is going to figure it all out, and they had to figure it out. There's a lot of transformational stuff happening right now with blockchain, with decentralized finance, with decentralized applications, where there's going to be some seismic changes in how the internet works, how commerce works, how content works. Like there's a lot of big things happening right now, and there are things that can supplant like the big players, right? That are just operating in a Web 2.0 world, and there's a Web 3.0. Just like there was all these Web 1.0 players that got displaced by Web 2.0, right? So that's just something I think when you said that just made me think of it, because I think everyone, I hear that repeatedly. Facebook will figure it out. They'll have to figure it out, right? And yeah, their chances are they'll probably figure out some solutions, but they don't have a ton of leverage here. Like I think a lot of people forget that as well. Like Apple, Amazon, Google, those three companies control everything. Like they are I think Facebook can get lumped in some respects to it, but really like Apple, Google, Amazon, they're the gatekeepers, right? So Apple, if you think about it, and this is kind of crazy when you think about this, like how many $10 billion, $100 billion, $1 billion companies that are dependent on Apple, right? Like if Apple removed them from the App Store, they would probably lose half to 75% of the market cap or go out of business, right? You think about there's a lot of them, right? There, Netflix, Spotify, Epic Games, like there's massive companies, some of the biggest companies in the world that are heavily reliant on their users interacting with their product through an iPhone, through an iPad, through Apple TV, right? And same thing with Amazon. Amazon hosts half of the websites in the world, right? It's like, and if you can't get hosted, you can't be online, right? And Parler is an example of a company that just realized they got hit by everybody at once, and you basically don't exist as a company if Apple, Google, Amazon say you don't exist. And so,
totally.
Facebook at the end of the day doesn't have a ton of cards to play here. They don't have a lot of leverage over Apple in this situation, and that's just the reality. So, but anyway, so back to the opportunity here. It's interesting when everything is going really, really well, people get really greedy, and I think that's what we're seeing right now. It's like you could have last year, starting after that big drop in March, obviously the market tanked 30-40%, hotel stocks dropped 75%, airline stocks, right? But after that point, you literally could have, if you pull up E-Trade, or if you want Robinhood, whatever you're using to trade, right? And you pull up any stock, I don't care what it is, just type in random ticker and look at the last year. I would say every single stock, with the exception of some cruise lines, which actually in the last month have my Carnival Cruise Line stocks up 40%. But like, except for those types of companies are up straight, not even just like this, like vertical line up 52-week high. Companies are up 5x, 10x, right? You could have thrown a dart and doubled your money.
Oh yeah.
And it's the same thing with real estate. Rates are the lowest they've been, real estate prices sky high. There's bidders on every single home. Crypto, every Bitcoin, everything sky high, right? So as somebody that is looking at long-term investing and looking at opportunities, like this is not a great, like I would much rather be on the other side of it. And that sounds cynical to say, right? It sounds cynical to say like, I actually want the bubble to kind of burst, but that's when people make real money. Like think about 08, 09. There were people who were buying Citi, JP Morgan, Bank of America, right? Companies for $5, $6, $8 a share. I forget what the end. A lot of these companies were down in single digits, right? Because everyone thought they were going out of business. JP Morgan's trading at $150 a share right now. People bought these incredible high quality bank stocks at just insanely low prices. You could have bought anything because it was people thought the world was going to end and everyone was selling. And the people that were smart and had cash were buying. They were buying real estate. They were buying stocks. They were investing in all these assets. People were just dumping just because people needed cash. They didn't have enough money saved up, so they were terrified. And so part of me looks at what's happening right now, and it's kind of the same thing as like iOS 14. It's people get complacent because things get easy, right? Things are pretty easy right now. And again, that might sound somewhat ignorant to say, but I think it's a pretty accurate statement to say that it has never been easier to make a 6-figure income or to build a 7-figure business in history. I think like today, 2021, March 3rd, like I don't think there's ever been an easier time for somebody that has no skills, no real experience, no real knowledge, no education, no college degree or anything to make a lot of money. And it's been this way for several years now, right? And I think part of me thinks that's a great thing. I think it's amazing to have all these amazing opportunities for people that don't have those opportunities. Previously, there were a lot of walls and barriers that made it very, very difficult and cost prohibitive to start businesses. But the other side of me is when it gets too easy, when people, not even when it gets too easy,
yes,
when people think it's easy. I think that's the bigger thing. I'm fine if it's easy, but when people start realizing and saying it's building a business is so easy, making money in the stock market is so easy, and that's what I'm seeing right now. That's what you're seeing online on the Reddit forums and everything is people just like first-time traders have never invested in the stock market until this year. They got a COVID stimulus check. They're buying fractional shares in Robinhood, and they think they genuinely believe this. And it's not everybody, but like a certain group of people genuinely believe that like you can't lose. This is the best thing in the world. I put money into this company and a month later it's doubled and then it goes up again and I keep doing it. And I'm going to borrow money now. I'm going to take a loan out, right? And I'm going to buy more stock. I'm going to buy stock with a credit card. And I think that's when things get really, really dangerous is when people start thinking the game is easy because it's only easy right now because we are dealing with unprecedented economic circumstances, right? We have literally more, I think I talked about this in the last podcast I did, like 20% to 25% of all the dollars in the history of our country, the history of the dollar, have been printed in the last year. Like 20%, 25% of every dollar ever printed in the history has been printed in a single year. You look at the M1 money supply. You can just Google M1 money supply, go to the Fed's website, and you can see the chart of the money supply. And it is straight up. So you have the Fed that's kept interest rates at basically zero. They're printing money. They're sending people checks, right? So of course things seem pretty easy right now. It's the stock market has kept being inflated artificially with low interest rates, but that will not last forever. Eventually interest rates will go up, and interest rates going up impact stocks because people use those rates to use discounted cash flows to value stocks today. So if rates go up, that has an impact on that discount rate, and people are willing to pay less for future earnings than they are today. That's why you're seeing growth stocks start to go down now. Same thing with real estate, right? If all of a sudden if your mortgage rate's 5% instead of 3% or 6%, 3%, you can only afford, maybe half the house. So home prices go down, and it's this cyclical thing that happens, and inflation goes up,
exactly.
So everything costs more, and then it's a lot harder to make money when all the factors are working against you. So that's my it's very doom and gloom of me, but like I think we need to have it because we've been in such a long bull market, and a lot of people have never seen a bear market. They don't really understand what it is. And as somebody that's looking for opportunities, somebody you're putting cash on the sideline, you're preparing for it, like you want those things to happen. You don't want the side effects, and I don't want the unemployment, and I don't want the social impact that comes with it. But from an economic standpoint, from an opportunist, capitalist standpoint, like you want those things to happen. And same thing with iOS 14. I think it's going to push a lot of people out of the market that probably aren't qualified yet to play in the market at the level they're playing at or trying to play at.
Yeah, completely.
That's my rant.
And to your to your point though, right? Like it's, you know what it is? I think it's exactly in these really frothy kind of moments, and to correlate it back to the, let's call it, for the sake of it, social advertising for D2C side of things, or I mean, not even D2C, right? It could be info, it could be anything where you just spin up a website, start putting money into an ad platform, let the algorithm do what it needs to do for you, learn how the algorithm works, get some data in there, and let it do its thing. Which, by the way, kudos to Facebook. Like that's like the golden standard of any kind of advertising platform, right? To for let any man, woman, and child with two pennies to rub together, put money into this platform and get positive returns, which is what they were getting really close. Um, the trouble is in those frothy moments, the majority of players that are in that space get to reap the benefits without having to have gone through the rigor of the fundamentals. Same thing with GameStop, right? A whole bunch of first time investors, retail investors, with a platform like Robinhood that allowed you to buy fractional shares, got to, if you got in early enough, you jumped in, and at the peak of it, what did it go to, like 500 I
About
think at the
500,
peak of it.
yeah, plus or minus a little
Yeah,
bit.
right, exactly. If you got in at $14 and went out, you can probably go, wow, I'm gonna join Reddit, jump into Wall Street bets, see what everyone is doing. This is the game, right? All I have to do is just listen to what all the other apes are saying. What stock do we like? And then I'm just gonna put it there. And I guess that's how people make money. And same thing with Facebook. It's okay, well, let me go into these courses, figure out what they are saying, not have to worry about any of the technical aspect of how all this stuff works. But why should I? Because I'm getting the benefits already. It's going to be almost like overkill if I went to learn all the technical stuff because I'm already getting benefits, right? Meanwhile, the ones that have spent a bit longer on the platform, or longer in advertising, or longer in running a business, they understand that they get to see it, they get the benefit of history, they get the benefit of hindsight to go, wait a second, this isn't natural, and this definitely isn't sustainable. There is going to be correction coming, and I've either spoken to people that have experienced corrections, or I've gone through one myself, so I know how to prepare. And to, I guess, to your first point, that's very probably the reason why I put out a lot of that content as well, is because a lot of the individuals that I've spoken to, and even groups, I guess, of people that I've interacted with, have not gone through anything like that, or their brains aren't even in that world, right? Like one of my favorite books to read, from one of my favorite authors, is Jim Collins, and you read How the Mighty Fall, and there are some really big names in there. Exactly what you said. Like at one point, Kodak and film was the de facto standard in all movie making, and they had an opportunity to pivot and go to and adopt digital. They did not. And I used to work in film, and I remember when digital first came out and the red cameras came out, and Kodak, instead of adopting into digital, went on a full-blown advertising campaign and marketing campaign to get, I forget who it was, I think it was like Spike Lee, um, and a whole bunch of other different directors, and put together a documentary on why film is always going to be better than digital. And those same exact directors were shooting on digital only. You know, it's funny how to
Yeah.
see how certain companies, um, try to claw back from. It's almost like denying the future, even though the writing's on the wall. Uh, and you know, having spoken to people inside of Facebook now, um, it's interesting to see, or hear rather, how fragmented of a company it is, considering how much headcount they have. They're running a small country of employees. So, you know, first of all, that's insane. But then next of all, it's the penny drop for me of how wacky this whole situation is when, so just for context, Right Hook is one of Australia's, like Asia Pacific's, highest spenders with Facebook as an independent agency. So we get assigned that tier of rep in Singapore for the Asia Pacific headquarters. And the penny dropped for me when the cluster of reps that my rep sit within and her boss, I don't think they're going to be happy for me to say this, but whatever, invited me for an hour and a half session to talk them through what's going to happen to Facebook. And that's when I went, oh shit, you guys are getting no intel whatsoever from your higher ups and from all that. You're just getting handed the same things that most reps get handed, which is follow best practices, increase your ad spend, and use CBO and this, that, and the other. But when it comes to the technical stuff, they hadn't even heard of the Facebook disruptor team, like, ever. And that's when I went, okay, well, wow, these guys really are not well placed to know what is happening. But then not only speaking to my reps, but then talking to conversions API or attribution Facebook marketing partners, I quickly learned that, how funny is this, the analytics team that does the ad manager reporting doesn't talk to how you have attribution tool in your business manager.
Yeah.
There's no crosstalk to the attribution team. And even within the attribution team, attribution for a certain vertical versus another one, I've heard of them doing completely overlapping studies that have no crosstalk whatsoever either. So to your point, exactly that, right? They are an 800-pound gorilla that don't even know that they've got possibly a parasite somewhere on their back that they can't reach. And it's not even on their radar, I think. So as much as they're trying to innovate and they're talking about Facebook commerce and, Shop Pay is now integrated with Facebook and all that. There's going to be a period where everyone is just going to be running around like a headless chicken for a while, I think.
Yeah, I think it's for me. It's I wish what happened to. And this is why I'm not as pessimistic about people getting kind of hit with a sledgehammer here, because we kind of got an early taste of this with the political stuff, right? So we've been dealing with this bullshit for like a year, basically, on and off. And by bullshit, I mean Facebook basically saying anything that falls under social issues, national importance, which is really broad, right? You can't advertise. And it's been, for us, it's been since before the election, right? They basically gave people a week before the election to submit new ads. And then starting on election day, everything got paused. And they've consistently pushed back the time that they're going to let you advertise. And so we had an option, right? We could just wait and hope that Facebook eventually let us advertise again. Or we say, hey, we got to figure out where to get more traffic. At the end of the day, there's a lot of ways to get eyeballs. There's a lot of ways to get clicks. Let's go find them all and test them. And that forced us to get creative. It forced us to try new things and test new things. And most things bombed. But we have found so many different traffic sources that maybe aren't as sexy, that maybe aren't as rapidly scalable, but have diversified us to the point where, frankly, I don't care if Facebook ever comes back for us. Obviously it would be nice because we can make a lot more money, but we're running a brand that'll probably do $20 million this year with barely any Facebook ad spend and also limited Google ad spend because Google's been doing the same type of thing. And it's because we're doing things like we're spending, 150, 200 grand a month on email list rentals. We found, hey, why try to target certain interest groups on Facebook to then show them my ads I want people that are interested in the Second Amendment, people that are interested in, right-leaning media, right? Why do that when I can just go, we have brokers we work with that manage hundreds of lists with millions of people on them that are really specific. So we have different groups. It's hey, we have, 100 different email lists with 1 million people on each one of people that opted into Second Amendment newsletter, gunsaregood.com, whatever it might be, like, Right Street Talks, like, and then the bigger ones like Newsmax, like Blaze, and not all of them back out, but like we've started finding, especially the big ones like Blaze and Newsmax. I mean, we're spending, they're expensive to do their newsletters because they're really big. We'll spend 5-10 grand on a single email, but it's driving 30, 40, $50,000 sometimes in day one, day two revenue really quickly. And so there's just so many things people have been doing. And I've been saying this for a long time. I started saying it because Ezra told it to me a longer time before that. Diversify your traffic sources, diversify your traffic sources. And I think everyone says it like, oh yeah, I'm going to diversify. But it's really hard to diversify when there's no real need to, right? When you're making so much money on
Exactly.
Facebook, it's like the party's not going to stop. Why would I try all these crazy channels when I can just make money here? And unfortunately, it takes something like this to force people to do it. And so I think that's one good thing that may come out of this is it's going to force a lot of people to have to diversify and look at other traffic channels. And I just want to tell everyone, like, there are plenty of places out there. There are plenty of places that are willing to take your money and give you targeted quality traffic. It might not be as advanced and scalable and targeted, but that's where focusing on a great offer, on a great product, and a great funnel, on a great follow-up sequence, all that stuff, great creative really comes in. So for us, that's been huge for the last year. And again, frankly, why I honestly don't, I care to an extent what happens because we have students and I talk about it, but like personally, it's not really financially impacting us, whatever Facebook decides to do, or whatever happens in the grander scheme of privacy.
And those are the people that I think are gonna survive and then in that landscape thrive, right? It's the ones that understand that realistically, if we get really dispassionate about it, traffic is traffic is traffic, right? It whether it's algorithmically driven or programmatically driven, or whether it is using an influencer or a publication that speaks to a certain type of demographic or psychographic or type of user or consumer. Um, it's all it is just driving people to a destination, and it's the whole point being the resonance between the destination and the people and what they want to spend money on. And it's so wacky to me how many people I've spoken to that somehow, just like diversify your traffic, the piece of advice that Ezra told you, somehow they nod their head as if like, yeah, I get it. But when it really comes down to it, it's the way that they speak almost reflects that they don't truly get it. It's like, yeah, but what have we, in times of strife, instead of making the mental choice to go, no, we need to start spending money and having lessons and learnings in these other channels, the line of thinking goes, no, let's just figure out what Facebook's going to do, or I'm still all in Facebook, or I'm still all in Instagram, which is, I get the thinking, stay within your lane. This is what you're good at. But there needs to be some type of a gut check internal call to go, what if this doesn't work out? Am I hedged enough? Have I put aside my 15, 20%, however, whatever the risk tolerance is, to spend that money on platforms that I'm uncomfortable with or have never tried before? Because if shit doesn't work out, at least I've learned for the past 3 months, 6 months. It's not a complete new experience for me when shit is hitting the fan and is getting flung everywhere and you're part of the collateral damage. And yeah, man, like I'm really same with you, right? Putting the value investor hat on and putting the long-term investor hat on, when everything is red, awesome, like best time, especially if you've got dry powder, like best time to jump in. But at the same time, it just scares me to think about how many D2C brands, how many info entrepreneurs, how many agencies are just going to get smacked in the face so hard because they are so Facebook reliant, and all their business unit economics have been contingent on the Facebook CAC, as
Totally.
opposed to, like any other type of blended CAC, and that's, they almost hinge their entire business model and their entire business strategy and their finances and the financials rather on a CAC from one of the most sophisticated platforms that have been out there for the longest time. And now the writing on the wall is that sophistication is going to, like, Facebook's going to be only going to be able to fight with one arm tied behind its back because of that loss of, the algorithmic loss is going to happen because of the loss of signals, creation of audiences that's going to be really wacky. Retargeting is going to be completely wacky as well. And for anyone that runs Facebook, in a intraday, hit refresh every half an hour, make decisions accordingly. If your stuff is going to be restricted, aggregated, delayed, you're going to have to shift your thinking in a really different way. Like Q3 this year is going to be completely wacky too if it stays the way, it goes on the course that it's going on.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be interesting, for sure. Like just seeing how everything really plays out. But it's like another reason why you should be building assets, right? Like that's another thing I love to tell people, and we've talked about this a lot of times. Like if you are a cash flow business where you're not really building any kind of enterprise value, it's like you make X dollars per month and that's kind of what's going on. That's how you're paying everything. You're not building something that could ever really sell or spin off, right? Or any way to really monetize additionally. And like now's the best time to have those things, to have assets, because like we're seeing it on the other side. Just like we rent email lists, we've also built a bunch of large email lists, and we can go and say, hey, we're going to sell you 20 cents for 75 grand, right? We're doing deals where we're basically selling rentals of our lists and able to monetize that. We have all these additional monetization pathways because we own our data and we own a really, really high quality customer base. And as it gets harder to reach customers cold, people are going to be looking for other ways to get in front of very, very specific people. And so whether it's just you having that asset base, like for us, it allows us to say, hey, we can acquire a customer a single time, and then we can launch additional brands around the same customer base. And that's what we're doing, right? We're building a portfolio of stores, a portfolio of brands all around the exact same customer avatar. So the same customer that comes in through our main funnel is also the perfect customer for these investing products. They're also the perfect customer for these survival products. They're also the perfect customer for these
I
apparel
love
products.
it.
And so we can, 3, 4x our kind of return on that initial investment. Plus we can launch new brands without any real paid traffic because we have this audience we can do an SMS blast to, we can do an email blast to, a push notification blast to, and test new product categories, test new ideas. But if you're 100% performance, if you're 100% affiliate, if you're 100% agency, with the exception of like agencies like you guys, where you're beyond that point. Like there's a lot of agencies in our space are really small, like a handful of people, maybe doing $1 million, $2 million a year. Like they lose a few customers, they're out of business. And those people are just like, when shit hits the fan, that's your business is gone, right? It's you're back at zero, and that should terrify people. That if that's even a possibility for your business, like losing Facebook leads to us basically losing our business, you need to make changes, and it's scary how many people just continue to not do that. And I don't know if it's just ignorance, I don't know if it's fear, I don't know if it's a combination of both. But it's sad to watch from the outside and see what's going to happen to a lot of people. Just like you said with COVID and kind of the brick and mortar businesses, a lot of people don't prepare. A lot of people don't put money away. They don't save money. They don't invest money. They don't plan for the worst case scenario, and the worst case scenario happens, and they're back at square one.
It's crazy, man. I watching COVID and watching, just observing human behavior in these really pointed type of moments in time, uh, it's so fascinating how I used to think, okay, well, let's look at a subject matter like climate change. Everyone knows it's coming. Some people deny it, sure, but it's hard to deny it when you've got Texas that like freezes over, and all these bad, Australia, like almost half of Australia burns down in 2020, 2019, and then you take that, uh, and you look at the way, my neighbors here live and the way I live. Like, we know climate change is happening. I'm not recycling every single damn thing that I touch, and I'm not saving every single drop of water, and I'm not doing the things that I'm supposed to do because the sky isn't burning red and fireballs aren't falling from the sky just yet, right? Meanwhile, so there's a scale of scary shit kind of perception to this, and uh, even with COVID and the advent of all those things happening, let's look at COVID, for example. So you could die, or you could spread it to your spouse, or you could spread it to your kid. This was like early days when we didn't really know what this COVID thing was. You hear of reports from China where old people are just like dropping dead in the middle of the hospital, and then meanwhile, I remember back when like all those meme videos of kids just going at like spring break being like, I don't care about COVID. I get COVID, bro. I'm just gonna keep partying. Like, give me liberty or give me death kind of thing. So even when there's clear and present danger, if for some reason we are, because of the good times that we've had for the past like decade or so, for some reason it's so easy to talk yourself out of that, to be like, it won't happen to me, which is I think what I'm noticing a lot.
Yeah.
It's yeah, it's wild, man. And exactly to your point, I was talking to Scott and I, my co-founder. We were talking 2 weeks back, and I was just I was on Slack. It was in the evening, and then I was just sitting here at the office doing a bit of thinking time, which I try to do daily at the start and end of my day. And I just randomly Slacked Scott, and I said, the thought of what's going to happen to a lot of these agencies, um, just kind of saddens me a little bit and worries me. The fact that I'm trying to say all these things, and a lot of my DMs are like, dude, why are you trying to scare everyone? Or stop this whole like sky is falling nonsense. You're not doing us any favors. And Scott replied, and he goes, yeah, if we are where we were a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, when we were like 14 people, boutique agency, I'd be shitting bricks too, right? And it's true, like it's true. If and we've done our own kind of revenue loss analysis and client loss analysis based off of what's happening, what could happen, and all the different doors. I guess it's just like plotting out chess moves type of deal. Um, and Yeah, it's not, by no means is it going to be business as usual. We don't intend for it to be business as usual, and we haven't modeled our business for it to be business as usual. Um, and what we're doing right now is just talking to all of our clients and being like, guys, we need to start we need to start changing your thinking. We've got all the playbooks at the ready. It's just whether you as a brand owner are willing to swallow that pill and confront that fact. Even, and if we're wrong, awesome, right? Nothing could be better than if we're wrong. But I'd rather be over prepared and wrong than over optimistic and wrong, because I'd rather brace for getting punched in the teeth rather than just be walking and whistling down the park and then someone punches me in the teeth. It just, very different sensation.
Yeah, it's an interesting concept. I talked about it a few episodes ago. The concept of like, it's called hyperbolic discounting, and that's essentially what most people do, and that's why most humans act the way they do. Right? It's why people have such a hard time dieting and getting in shape, because we inherently, and just as humans, discount the future. right? So a future benefit is discounted back to today, and a benefit today has higher weight, right? So that's why it's like, if I want to lose 10 pounds, but there's a pint of Ben and Jerry's ice cream right here, a lot of people eat the ice cream and say, I'll start tomorrow or start the next day, because that benefit of the weight loss is so far in the future. I'm not going to realize the benefit by, like, if I choose to not eat the ice cream, I don't really get any benefit other than I'm like kind of pissed that I didn't eat that, right? And it's the same thing with people impulse buying things. It's they're buying something today instead of, you know, the financial security they have from investing it and reaping the benefits down, you know, 10 years from now. And it's the same thing with Facebook, right? It's the same thing that's happening with everything right now. It's, hey, I realize that there's a probably the smart move to do X, Y, and Z for the future, but I really want instant gratification. I need the dopamine. I need the success. I need the win. So I'm going to keep doing things like I'm doing it until it just doesn't work anymore. And then the benefit will be so low today that then I'll be forced to change, because the kind of equation changes for me and how I'm balancing things versus today and in the future.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the famous one marshmallow now or two marshmallows later kind of test, right?
Yeah.
With the kids.
So I want to, so he stops scaring the shit out of people and giving people absolutely zero hope. And that's why I want to title this episode like "No Hope" or "Prepare to be depressed."
Right, or just like,
hour.
or like, here are the brutal facts. Man, you want to get for anyone else, if they think this is depressing, go on Twitter and look up Eric Seufert, Seufert. You want to get depressed, go there. So Eric Seufert is like pretty much the go-to people that everyone listens to from a mobile app attribution standpoint. He's the owner of Mobile Dev Memo. He consults on a few. He's ex-Rovio, and he consults, on a few. He's an investor in mobile apps and consults on a few mobile app gaming companies as well. And the mobile app world, if you're in D2C and info and you're getting depressed, like the mobile app world right now is getting shaken up in some crazy ass ways, and they are just, I'd like our buddy Paul J likes to say, I'd be shitting blood.
Yeah, 100%. I think they're getting hit the hardest. What do you? I don't know if you saw this this story, but basically, like, DraftKings and Airbnb both have had earnings recently, and in both the earnings, like, they talked about marketing and how, percent of revenue that their kind of marketing makes up. And I thought it was really interesting because DraftKings, I think they've spent in the last year, they were spending basically 80 cents to make a dollar. Like their cost to acquire a customer and their marketing as a percent of revenue is off the charts. On the flip side, you have Airbnb, and Airbnb basically paused almost all of their marketing, all the paid media when COVID hit. They basically said, like, we're going to pull back pretty much everything, go almost to zero. Obviously, they didn't go to zero, but dramatic shift. They have recovered 95% of their pre-COVID traffic without turning ads back on. And so now in the earnings call, they basically said, going forward, we're basically going to pretty much stop performance marketing. Like, we're going to either just cut it almost entirely or make it a very, very small piece of the pie, which is interesting because that whole world of kind of venture-backed, companies that are either D2C, that are the product of companies like Purple, Away, Casper, or, the Ubers, Airbnbs, those companies that were basically built on the back of spending a shit ton of investor money to acquire customers and figure it out down the road. You have companies like Airbnb saying now, like, we're basically shifting almost all of our ad spend to brand, to PR, to top of funnel, and moving away from performance. I'm curious what you think of that at a high level. Obviously, Airbnb can afford to do that because they've spent a very, very long period of time and billions of dollars to turn their company name essentially into a verb, and so they can benefit with that. But just as the trend now, iOS 14, everything going on, like, do you see more and more companies shifting their ad spend from performance to brand, PR, things that are less trackable, but rely on these kind of advanced algorithms and advanced targeting, advanced tracking, and attribution more.
Yeah, it's. I think that's a really great thought experiment, right? Because to your point about the whole Airbnb thing, it's there's this invisible line of brand equity where once you cross that line of your brand essentially becomes the de facto standard. Uh, like let's Airbnb it, let's Google it, right? Let's or you can say a certain word and people know exactly what it is, like Supreme as an example. Then keeping your paid media above the line, I think there's a very compelling reason to, especially when the data shows you and you do a really ballsy experiment like just pull all direct response performance marketing. Um, the Meanwhile, at I guess at the small to mid business kind of level, it's interesting how because of this, I posed this question in a clubhouse room. I'm like, so but with everything that's coming down the pipe with iOS 14 and with web privacy in general, and the fact that you can't if for opted out users, and most platforms are taking a very pessimistic stance on the number of people that opt in. Very low numbers. Optimistically, even at the most optimistic level, they're talking 30%. More realistically, they're bracing for 10 to 15% of people opt in. Everyone else they anticipate will opt out, all the iPhone users. Now, if that amount of people opt out and you can't essentially ad platforms can't see quote unquote behavioral data of users on websites added to cart but didn't purchase, etc., then the question that I posed in the clubhouse room is, does middle of funnel kind of go away, and what happens to that bottom of funnel type very specific product catalog retargeting, or product specific retargeting? How does that go away? So then I've heard from enough people where their minds, at least the ones that are trying to wrap their heads around it and come up with solutions, are almost going in two different directions, right? One is super heavy top of funnel. Let's invest in brand with some direct response thinking to it. And then the other way are the ones that are going to go hyper granular and almost break their campaigns down to having destination landers based off of a certain ad set or a certain audience, and then just build it out that way, just so that they can get a handle on their data. And then there's this other camp, which I think I'm kind of sitting in as well, where it's figuring out I've looked at the market and kind of tried to figure out what affordable tools there are on the first party tracking side of things to at least capture the data, and then API back to whatever app platform everything, and knowing that they can't match everything, but at least have that capability to supplement all this stuff that's happening. But to answer your question, I think I don't know. I think the larger brands that have a bit more brand equity, it's not like they're not doing that already. So I think they're just going to keep doing that. And the performance side, I think they're just going to have to recalibrate, possibly skew a bit more towards search, rather than just the interruptive retargeting side of things. And then on the other side, for the ones that are a lot more performance marketing focused because they don't have that brand equity, the smaller brands, they're still going to have to somehow figure out, one, how to view their data and make decisions on their data without a rolling 24 to 48 hour delayed window. They're going to have to wrap their heads around, how do I read aggregated data? What does that even mean? Like, thinking about it like a speedometer, if I'm going 50 miles an hour, what is the aggregated version of a 50 miles an hour? Like, what does that actually mean when I'm reading that data? And how do I make decisions off of that if you've never been exposed to something like that before? And then further to that is, um, how do we still tick off that direct response route, uh, and structure our campaigns accordingly, so and the destination URLs accordingly, so that we know what's working if it's going to be this hazy kind of glob of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I've heard both camps really.
Yeah, it's what fascinates me, and the thing that I think I wish more people thought about this is there are so many brands that I've become familiar with over the last few years that have been able to build massive businesses without really any advertising. And it's kind of the holy grail, right? But you look at a brand like Supreme, which is able to become one of the biggest apparel brands in history, one of the biggest lifestyle brands in history, by creating exclusivity, by creating a cult like following. And now there's more brands like that. Nugget is a great one. My wife and I talk about it. There's like the, it's this couch. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's like a 5-piece futon. If you just like Google Nugget couch,
I'm doing it right
and
now.
super super simple. It's literally two guys initially started as a futon company for like a modular futons. Their first hire used to work in like kindergarten, and she said, this would actually be way better to be positioned as a modular couch slash fort builder for kids. And that's what you can do. You can take these pieces and build forts, and you can add more to it. Super expensive. It's in the 200s for basically one couch. They have been consistently sold out basically since launch. Like they can't keep it in stock. There's like Facebook groups dedicated just to like being first to get access to buy it.
Wow.
There's secondary markets that have sprung up. And the same thing happens with another brand. There's a brand called Posh Peanut that we buy a ton of stuff from for Quinn. They make baby clothes. And they've been able to build this insane business with the same type of thing. They have these just Facebook groups with tens of thousands of moms that are just consistently like talking about the latest prints. There's people who are literally buying up all the prints as soon as they go up there and then reselling them or holding them. There's people who are like buying them but like keeping them in pristine condition so they can resell them. And like that's what I try to tell people in my trainings every week when people ask me like, why is my offer not creating? Why are my Facebook ads not working? Why is this not working? And it's always, well, what's the X factor? Like, what is special about what you're selling, right? It's a lot of people have businesses that they can't answer that question, right? They can't answer the question, like, what is it about your business that makes it truly unique and novel and deserves to have a large customer base, a loyal customer base? And I think more people need to think and do like research into these types of brands, these companies that have been able to focus first on building an incredible brand, an incredible product that's really unique in the marketplace, and fostering a really, really loyal customer base, and kind of fanning that flame to build momentum. And the problem is that it's a slower model, right? It takes a lot longer to do that. It's a lot more time consuming. It's a lot less gratifying in the short run. But like those businesses, they don't give a shit what's happening right now, right? That's the amazing thing. Their biggest concern
Yeah.
is being able to keep up with their order demand, like being able to actually sell the product and not ship out 3 months from now, 5 months from now. Peloton, right? Same thing. Like you can't get one. It's so in demand that you're waiting months and months and months after you give them, $2,000, $3,000. Tesla, the same thing, right? Tesla, their pre-order model. People are, for the Roadster, people were, I forgot what the deposit was, because when they were doing the Roadster deposits, that's before they came up with like the $1 deposit model and all that stuff, or the $100 deposit model for the different cars. I think it's like 2,500 or maybe more. It might have been like even like tens of thousands. I forget what the exact amount, but a lot of money. And people have been waiting for like 2 years to get their Roadster. And Elon's saying it might not be another 2 years, might be another 3 years. Like he's just playing with free money. And that's what people should be thinking about. Like I'd rather people freak out about how can I do that as opposed to like, how can I make my ads still work with all these privacy issues? It's a backwards way of
I,
thinking.
it, it is. It really is. It's funny, right? Because you got all these people that. Uh, Sorry, let me rephrase that. It's not all these people. It's you've got these groups of people that ask exactly those questions about how do I make my ads work, and it's almost like their entire world is enveloped by that problem of ad solving this is going to solve everything else, and they really hone in on that to the point where it becomes their entire world. And meanwhile, the mental and like metaphor that I have in my head um, is like all those bros that go out to the club every weekend and just try to like pick up chicks. Like that's all they care about, and they complain that they don't have a life. It's like, yeah, because you have zero retention skills, bro. You just want to seal the deal by the end of the night. And after that, you don't text them. You don't care about them. You're just caring about the next time you go to the club and the next chick you meet. And then you get upset that the one that you like doesn't want to stick around. Yeah, because you didn't put any effort in for them to stick around. Right? There's no respect to that side. And by respect, I mean they don't actually put value into that side because so much attention is on cold acquisition. Get it in, we'll do some email flow, and even those email flows are so transactional. It's like, hey, don't forget to complete your cart, or hey, now that you've purchased something, here's a discount for you to purchase something else. End of story. I don't want to talk to you ever again. I'm going to go back to the club and look for more chicks. And that overtly simplistic thinking is going to be the undoing of so many people. And this isn't news. It's not like this is a novel idea, right? But somehow there are so many brands that are still tethered to that thought, or that mentality, rather.
Yeah. And again, it just goes back to the thing of like what's coming. I think the impact this is going to have is going to be a net benefit for most people. Even if you go out of business, right? I think even if this causes you to go out of business, that'll be a super valuable lesson for your next business. That like, okay, I made a lot of rookie mistakes, and now I'm going to do it again and dust myself off, and this time I'm going to diversify and focus on building an actual brand, an actual asset, and having something truly unique about what I'm selling, and have a personality and all these things. So I think that's kind of the silver lining, right? Is it's just, failing isn't a permanent thing, and we all
Absolutely.
fail plenty of times. It's a matter of like when or if you fail in the next year, are you going to take that lesson and apply it to the next thing you start?
Yeah, for sure. And the exercise that I like playing with myself is what would cause us to fail today. Like, what is the most immediate threat of failure right now? And then how are we gonna what can we do today to change that, just so that we can get to that place of, not find us in that place, because that's exactly what happened to me in my first venture, where the writing was on the wall, but that whole stay the course entrepreneur advice that you get a lot of the time, is stick to what you know, and all that type of stuff caused that startup to go completely nowhere. But I take that and I go, that in fact was no time wasted whatsoever, because there were so many learnings that come out of that, so many conversations that came out of that, and so much that can apply to this venture. And that's the compounding effect, right? You're always looking for ways that you can get extract the good stuff and then compound it into the next one.
So on that note, I'm sure you want to start your actual work day over there. I know there's a ton of, because we can talk for hours. I think the days that happening are few and far between now as a dad. We have our walk schedule and everything, but I know there's a ton of like technical stuff on iOS 14 and what's happening that you've put together. And I know people watching probably are like, I need to learn that stuff. I need to hear about it. And the reason I didn't spend our entire hour talking about it is one, it's just frankly kind of boring and not that exciting.
It is.
And two, because
Yeah.
like it's just talking about it. It's so technical and so much stuff happening. It's really not going to be that helpful. Whereas you have like documentation and things people can actually pull up, download, and when they have their time, they can go through and have a resource there. So where's the best place? And we'll drop links and stuff. But for people listening, watching right now, the best place to go get more content, more information about the changes.
Yeah, for sure. I think at this point, the easiest way to consume this kind of fire hose of stuff that's happening and that's evolved. That's a troublesome thing about this too, right? It's evolving very, very, very quickly. Like, last year it was private click measurement from Apple's advice was like 1 bit of data. So that's just 8 conversion events. And then in February, they backed off a little bit. Now it's 2 bits, which changes it to 16 events. That hasn't changed on the Facebook side of things, but so it likely is going to change again. So that being said, I think the easiest way to consume it would be on my Twitter. I've got a pinned video. My handle is @RealDoseOfD. I've got a pinned video in there just to prime everyone, and it's a video that I hope. My objective for that video was for it to pass the mom test. That's the first thing I wanted it to do. And then from there, you can kind of get yourself a bit deeper, keeping in mind for everyone else, I think that has the opportunity to listen or watch this, I am not a technical person myself. So I had to go through that journey, and everything that I'm sharing in the vein of how does this pass the mom test? Because I've got my own kind of like internal mom sitting in my head going, I don't understand this shit. Like, how do I simplify this? Because some of it's really technical. Like, you're going to have to read through like API docs and shit, or at least I had to,
Yeah, which is always fun. That's exactly what we want to do at the end of the day is read through a bunch of technical documentation on all this. So yeah, definitely recommend going just following you on Twitter so that when people don't have to do that, they can just follow you and read your stuff and let you do all the hard work of distilling it and making it reasonable and readable and legible for people like us, all the simpletons that don't know what's going on the technical side of things.
Yeah, totally. It's the simpleton talk is my favorite kind of talk, because at least that way my brain can understand it too. Because I listen to some of these experts and I just get so lost.
Yeah, you walk away more confused than you did before you go in there. So it's I know it's going to be evolving and changing, and we'll do this on a more regular basis so we can just keep the conversation going. One, selfishly, because it gives us an excuse to just catch up and chat, and two, because I'm sure
Totally.
by the next time we do it, there's going to be a lot more stuff to talk about, a lot more updates, and possibly by then actual real world kind of data and implications of all the changes. So dude, it's always a blast to chat with you. It's always one of my highlights of my week, month, year when we get to jam, and definitely want to do it again. So thanks so much, man.
Right back at you, man. Much love to the fam too.
Will do. All right, guys, we'll see you next week. Thanks everyone.